Check 1, 2, 3, 4. Dave, do you know if there's a presentation in RHA or just a speaker, question mark?
come to my home. When will it? It will come out within the next couple of weeks, right?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Wow, that got quiet quickly. My name is Matt Jennings. I'm the editor of Middlebury Magazine. I will speak as briefly as possible because I know you're not here to hear me. But it is always my great pleasure at this time every year to introduce the Alumni Achievement Award winner, or winners in this year, it's singular. As you can imagine, editing the magazine, I'm blessed with meeting a lot of fascinating people and having the opportunity to tell their story. And then when it comes around to this time of the year, we encounter the best of the best and what they embody. And that's certainly true for Dr. Jill Seaman. I'm not going to recite her bio. You can read a brief blurb in the program. You will certainly learn more from her as she speaks, but there are a couple things I just wanted to note. You are in the presence of a certified genius. As determined by the MacArthur Foundation. You are also in the presence of someone that Time Magazine dubbed a hero of medicine. Those accolades aside, as impressive as they are, what really touched me is I've known of Jill for years. As I was preparing for this introduction, I was reading more about her, and I was really struck by how selfless this person is. She has dedicated her life not only to caring for people, but caring for people who live in a way that we can't possibly imagine. The things that people in America take for granted, like running water and electricity and a solid roof above your head, that doesn't happen where she works in South Sudan. When she goes home to Alaska, it's strange to think about this. She's almost repairing to a place of luxury, and this is in a small Eskimo village 400 miles west of Anchorage and 400 miles from Siberia. That's where she retreats to return to the first world. The rest of her time is spent in the South Sudan, and she does it for the love of the people. She first went there with Doctors Without Borders, and then when Civil War broke out in the 90s, and this is Doctors Without Borders, who will go anywhere, said, we can't be here. They left, and she stayed. She left Doctors Without Borders and decided to stay and set up her own operation, and she's been doing it ever since. It's my great privilege and pleasure to now turn the microphone over to Dr. Jill Seaman.
So thank you very much. I have to tell you, I'm so nervous that I forgot even what I was going to say in response to his amazing comments. But I would say that I do have social skills well honed to a mud hut, so it's much easier to go to Bethel, Alaska, where we have lots of mud, than to other places. But I really want to thank everybody, and especially Meg, who encouraged me to come. And I have to tell you, I asked Meg, so what would I talk about? And this is what Meg told me. She said, talk a little bit about being in Middlebury and how that might have shaped your trajectory in life, and talk about working for the Yupiks and South Sudan. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've never talked about that type combination of things ever before. So this is a first run for you guys. And I don't have anything profound to say, but I do have a lot of pictures. But I can tell you how I got to Middlebury. When I was in high school in Moscow, Idaho, I didn't know where to go to school, but I did know that some people left home and went to college. And so I thought that was a good idea. My parents thought it was a good idea, and I thought I should try to take a risk. And I had two options. One was to go to a big city, and the other option was to go east of the Rockies. And going to a big city sounded more scary than going east of the Rockies. So I ended up in Middlebury. I found Middlebury in an Information Please Almanac. It said that girls liked the program and that it was good. So I wrote, and they let me come, and I was very, very happy. During the summer, at my summer job waitressing at the Nobby Inn, the waitresses got together before I left to let me know that they were behind me, but that I should be very careful, because if I went east of the Rockies, they might try to make me into a communist. So I had to worry about it. So I was a teeny bit apprehensive, but not too bad. And yeah, I got here, and it was very nice that it was small, very nice. And I was very happy. And it was a liberal arts college, and this was after the 60s, so there weren't too many requirements, and you could take whatever you wanted. And I needed a class, and so for some reason I signed up for Introduction to Political Philosophy or something. But before that, I had read like maybe 2 pages of something about Socrates and decided he was a really arrogant man, and he was really mean the way he taught. And so I get to this class, and it was a class from Professor Murray Dry. And the first book was Plato's Republic, but I was in the class, so I had to read it, and it was excellent. And I have to tell you that it was that class that got me into discussions about giving an account of yourself and how we relate as a society, our interactions, how they're controlled by the social contract, but also by ourselves. And lots of us got addicted to his classes, and I took several, and I took lots of religion and poli-sci classes, even though I was a biochem major, and that worked out very well for me. So I think that those are really your formative times. But before I stop talking about Middlebury, I did most of my studying at the Science Center, and I really, really loved it. I remember physics, and people remember me, I just heard recently, as being slow. I mean, in a good way, and I did. I took 1 hour to read every 10 pages of my first physics book. I would try to make all those formulas work, make a concept in my head, and I loved it. I really, really loved it. And the same thing happened with cell bio and with PChem. Courses that I've never stopped loving, although I don't understand them at all anymore. But that ability to have curiosity and have an outcome, and to be able to look at different options, is really something you get from a liberal arts education that you might not have gotten at a place that gave only multiple choice tests. So it was awesome. And I did then, in the summer of '73, read Joseph Kennedy's book, In Critical Condition, about healthcare. And then I wrote my application. And I wrote, we all had to write little essays, and I basically wrote that doctors shouldn't earn too much money and everybody should have access to healthcare. And I sent it in, and later my father read it, and she told me that I'd shot myself in the foot and I should think of another career because I probably wasn't going to get this one. But I think they didn't read it, and they let me into University of Washington. So that was very nice. And one more comment about Middlebury compared to a big city. So in Middlebury, when they accept you, they give you all this information about what's going to happen, where you can be, all this really nice stuff. You feel very well surrounded by people that care about you. So after I got admitted to University of Washington, I got one communication from them during the summer. And that communication was, if you want to withdraw, you'd better do it now or you'll lose your money. That was all. So I think I chose right to come here. But I'd like to say that, when you're in medicine and you're worried about what's going on, it's interesting. I don't have the language of law or human rights, but it's really interesting to realize that it was like in this century that individuals suddenly had human rights, and that hadn't been codified by anybody before. And of course, I just thought it was normal and didn't realize this was a major advance. And if the preamble to the WHO Constitution says something like what it says in the other one listed there, the right to enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health is a human right. And I think that's just really, really, really amazing. and is something we haven't attained yet, but I'm going to show that we've worked for it, and there have been major changes in life, in getting access to care and access to treatment in all segments of the world. So my first job out of medical school was with the UPICs. That's the yellow area there, and it was a very nice place to work. While I was working there, I have lots of stories about the area, but the interesting thing was I ended up in a refugee camp, Ethiopian refugee camp during the famine, and ended up in Trop Med School. And they were asking everyone where they were from. And they were from Congo at that time, from Ethiopia, from Cambodia, from all these places, and they came to me, and I was from Bethel, Alaska. And they said, oh, well, then you're an expert in TB. Well, I'm not an expert in TB, but Bethel is very famous in TB circles because, in fact, lots of the prevention data that we have now came from what happened in UPIC area, all the areas that were native, but especially the UPIC area. There were villages, or most of the villages had 25% of their people with active TB at any one time in the 40s. And I thought here's a nurse trying to help people, and the only thing they could help with in the 40s was, I think, hygiene. And so I believe that's why most of the native families you go to have a bottle of Jix bleach still in their house. So it was very successful for getting bleach in the Delta. But the most amazing thing is, well, it has the highest, until AIDS, it had the highest incidence of TB death rates in the world. And in 46, the interesting statistic I pulled out of some ancient pamphlet was that 43% of the death certificates for Native Americans showed that the cause of death was TB. And in the 50s and 60s, they dropped that way down so fast, it's unbelievable. And the way they brought it down was treatment. And really, getting people out of poverty is good, but treatment is where it's at for TB and lots of infectious diseases, actually. And the way they did it was with community health workers, because you needed someone in the village. Can you imagine, not my picture, by the way, can you imagine getting 25% of a village, of every single Native American village, into some sanitarium? I mean, this is like not going to happen. So they did get village health aides, and that program has really increased. They're people chosen by the Native Corporation, and they get education in primary health care, and it's very symptom-oriented, and they still work to this day, and there's still health aides in every single one of our villages, 50 of them, from villages the size of 50 population to villages the size of 1,500, and they report to the hospital for complicated patients and for evacuations. And it works really, really well. That didn't start with WHO until in the mid-70s with the Alma-Ata agreement in Russia someplace, which never got funded, by the way, but they always came and looked at Bethel to find out what was really going on with community health workers. This was one of my clinics in Stony River. This is an Athabascan village. It was beautiful. The area around Bethel, this is what it looks like today. When you fly in, it looks something like this, just like it looks when you fly into Old Fangak, where I work in South Sudan. And this looks the same. This is the fish camps in the Bethel Delta area up close, and this is the fish camps in South Sudan. So I actually didn't go that far away, although there's a little difference in temperature. And because most of my adult life has been spent in South Sudan, I'd really like to focus mostly on South Sudan. And I decided to just focus on two diseases, Kala-Azar, which is a neglected disease, and TB, which is a major killer in the world, because there is no time to focus on everything. And they fit into what I really want to say, which is I think it's very possible to get excellent health care to the poorest people in the world. And the problem is not they can't do it, they can't take medicines, they don't have watches. The problem is we haven't gotten it there yet. And we're trying, and I think there's a lot of people trying, and I think we've had major successes, so I'd like to tell you about them. But first, I want to introduce you to South Sudan. We live on the edge of the world's biggest swamp. This is bigger than the Amazon basin during the rainy season, so we call ourselves the first. And it makes access very complicated because there's no roads. There's no roads at all. Even where there could be roads, there are no roads. It's a Nilotic, semi-nomadic cow culture. You can see the cows there enjoying freedom. And then the kids catch one of the cows so they can drink directly before their sister comes and milks the cow properly into a calabash, I would sort of challenge anyone to be able to sit on their heels, hold the calabash between their knees, milk right into the calabash while looking at a camera. I thought that was pretty amazing. But it's really a cow culture. This boy has taken the cow dung out of the barn because it's the rainy season. He dries it out in the sun. If the sun goes away and it starts to rain, he has to take it all back in. But the cow manure is really, really important. Of course, you can burn it. You can also get away mosquitoes. But the other things you do is you make it into like a cement. And so they make a nice, firm, table-like cow dung platter outside their house where the women can do the cooking because there's something flat and semi-clean. It also is used in all the construction because all the mud would not stick unless it had straw and cow dung in it. So it's really important. But it's important for other reasons. Cows are really part of their genetic makeup. If you were a young man and you had decided which woman you wanted to marry and you'd gotten a cow ready, and the cow was going to go to that woman plus some more cows so that you were able to have her, and yes, they are bought, sadly, but they're treated well. Then if you died, and you gave the cow still, the song cow went to that family, her first child is that boy who dies' biologic, genetic son, according to the Nuer. So they're really more than cash. They're really part of your family line. And you see that a lot in the way they're used and the way they're respected. But because everybody knows there's famine in South Sudan, there doesn't have to be. It's the war that did that. And I just thought I'd show you that, yes, they can get beautiful harvests. There's maize hanging up. There's sorghum in the front. There's a chicken coop in the back. And if it dries up so much they can't stay at their house, then they collect all their worldly belongings and go with the cows to where there's water. So this is Sudan. I went at the time of one of the biggest outbreaks in the world in Western Upper Nile, which is now called Unity. And you can see the arrow where that is. It's a little bit to the west of the Nile. It's mostly Nuer, the north part is Dinka. And now I work in Fangak, which is east of the Nile, and it's mostly Nuer, and there's the Dinka are to the east. And in both places, everybody got along, and, well, mostly. And it was into that place that I dropped in, not knowing that much about Kal-Azar, but having heard that the WHO said there were like 500,000 cases and that it had a 95% death rate if untreated, and had started being recorded in 1904. The first case was remembered in, I say, Western Upper Nile, WUN. It's called Unity State now if you look it up, but at the time it was Western Upper Nile. And a couple years later, there were lots of displaced people, not refugees, displaced people in Khartoum. Khartoum is in the north of Sudan. It's many, many, many days walk away. And they had 700 people come from our area. And that was very scary, not to the government, but to the doctors who actually care very much about people. And in 1989, MSF opened a treatment center for Kal-Azar. 4 months after they opened it, I showed up. And we started a treatment center. We did surveys using the local paths, as you can see. And we spent a lot of time on the surveys during the off-season trying to figure out what had happened. We were told, we got a list from one of the chiefs of 1,000 people who were under him who had died in 2 months, which is a brilliant piece of epidemiology from a chief that is illiterate who came and brought it to us. And when we did all of our numbers, we came out with a minimum of 50% of the population was already dead before we started treatment. And that's really incredible. If 50% of Middlebury or Bethel or Chicago or someplace died, the whole world would know. But there was a war and nobody spoke an international language or had access to the outside world. And so we'd go walking and you'd go to a village and you'd still see some ash from fires that they had had. And you'd still see the sticks where the cows were attached. But there was nobody there. It was just really unreal. This was the place they told us we should put our treatment center. When we got there, its name is Douar. When we got there, the health workers said, there's only 4 of us from Douar left here. But there were 1,000 5 years ago. That's really amazing, huh? And this is the tree that hosts the vector. This is an acacia, Acacia soriale, which is has the red bark, and it's the most common acacia tree, and the forests are where the sandflies live, meaning prevention or doing something about the vector is virtually impossible. This is the little vector. She's actually really cute. She's smaller than a mosquito, has little hair on her V-shaped wings, and she has sometimes, actually way too often, she has Calazar parasites in her saliva, which she sticks in before she sucks up your blood and flies away. And about 3 months after you get infected is when you start getting sick. If you're in India, the disease is really indolent. It goes like that, waits 3 months, and then it goes very slowly. The end point without treatment is still death, but it takes months and months before you pass. So people have actually time to try to do eradication. You can go from one village to the other. But for us, I have actually documented a child whose first fever was at 2 weeks, and who was at 2 weeks prior to their death. And that's really, really fast. This is a horrible disease. If you read the missionary letters, you see there's a whole tribe that almost was done in a couple of years when they had one of these ferocious epidemics. And here's the problem. This is how you get there. This is the infrastructure. You can see that, excuse me. You can see that the person is being carried in a mosquito net by 2 people. They have to have not broken their legs when they walk through the swamps. And then they have to have some women who are carrying all your worldly belongings and enough food for you to get there. And if 50% of the population died, how do you get to the treatment center? And that's where the access problem was a problem. Man, I used to dream that WHO was going to come in and put white tents all through the area, and they were going to be testing and treating every single one of those white tents. But WHO couldn't come in because the government of North Sudan said there was no problem. And you have, for WHO, which is a UN organization, you have to have permission from the government. So they could sponsor us with giving us drugs for some sort of study or whatever, but they were not allowed to really formally help. And when you have trouble getting in, if your mother dies, your sister keeps coming with you. And sometimes we'd get kids who were found by some man on the road, the little dirt path, and they were next to the mosquito net with their dead parent inside the mosquito net, and they would bring the children to us. Whenever we asked, people said, yeah, we lost 8 people from our family, we lost 12 people from our family. Those were the numbers that everybody gave. And this is how people showed up. And they get contractures. This child, by the way, lives and does fine. You get contractures where you can't even open your arms or your legs because you've just sat in a little ball for so long. And once you get there, we'll take your blood. It's all different now. Really, things have improved. You take your blood, and then you take the little piece of paper, put it in some saline, and do some dilutions, and put some magic stuff in it, and then you get, as you can see these people are doing here, so we had expats doing it in the beginning, no more, and then you get this type of dilution table, and where you can decide which person has Calazar and which person doesn't. We also were very lucky to be able to train one of the national staff. This is Tito, who has only one eye. He was the first person we could get who knew how to look through the microscope, that we could tell how to tell the difference between a platelet and an amastogote from the parasite, because they're really, really hard to see. But he did wonderfully and trained everybody else. I think I'll skip over the little study we did, but just to tell you that this test was really good. People tried to tell us it was no good and we should use a different titer, and because we couldn't possibly have that many people. In fact, the British company that made the drug stopped sending it because they were sure we were selling it for a profit or something. And so they had to take the pictures, at which point they gave us a cut rate, which was very nice. So the answers would come out in 2 days, and so twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, we would admit, and we could admit up to 100 people at a day. Obviously, we didn't have today's electronic medical records, so we simplified things with 1 page that you just put check marks in. After you wrote the name carefully, everything else was check marks. That's because if people haven't gone to school, they don't have the fine motor coordination to be able to write and fill in little boxes. So we had them check them. And that worked really, really well. The treatment is with a heavy metal, and as you know, lots of us like to drink bottled water or something, and because it doesn't have heavy metals in it, and we inject them. But it works. And it has toxicities, but the worst problem for the Calazar patients is they're immune compromised once they're so sick with Calazar. And so they get all these other diseases. So together with our death data and looking at it and having CDC come and check our diarrhea, we developed syndromic diagnosis. This is something you can do with people that didn't have the opportunity to go to medical school. They can actually do this. They treated this whole outbreak, this whole epidemic has been treated more than once by national staff who never had the advantages of an education. And I think if there's anything I offered to South Sudan, it would be to say, yes, we can do that. No, we don't have to just treat 20 people at a time, which is one of the ideas. Just choose 20. Oh my gosh, you can't choose 20 people. You can't ration care like that. So I think that was one of the biggest things that we could bring. This is after they get seen by the first person, the second person injects them, and they have to have a place to live, so you find a couple of sickles or pungas and they can make a place to live. And then they bring their cows, which have too many flies. And then we have a problem of potable water. I don't know if you can see the 2 holes behind that lady's head. That's where we get our water. And the reason she's laughing is her calf fell in one of them. We have to take it out before we can get water again. But this also was a huge problem because the expats who came, expats, we like potable water, right? So you would have to scrub off the candles that were filtering it, and you had to scrub them off before the water got anywhere near through because it was so full of other stuff. And so it was very hard. You could say it was a big mistake to have put a treatment center where there was no well. And in a way it was. When we moved up, the Red Cross said they were going to put one in. We moved up and the Red Cross got kicked out of the country. But it would have taken more logistics than even the Red Cross had to get a well there. And there were tens of thousands of people treated. So it's hard to say what the right answer is. But of course, much of the problem is because of the war. This is our clinic the morning after a midnight attack. But even with that, we can do high-tech medicine. This is liposomal amphotericin B going in by IVs hanging from a tree. So we've actually done more now, but you really can do something. You really can get excellent care to the bush. And this is what the epidemic curve looked like. These are treatments. The reason why it looks like 2 years is that the season comes from June to June. So it was the 31st of June to the 1st of June to the 31st of May, all of these year numbers. So it's only 1 year. So 1 year we almost did treat 10,000. That was 2 treatment centers. But that's a lot of people, That's a lot of people. And our national staff kept count. And it was just amazing. Unfortunately, the worst part about it is a graph that I made it up. And the dark blue lines are the people who died of Kala-Azar by year. And I did make it up, so this is not to be published anyplace. But basically, that's what's happening. They all died before we got there, and lots of people couldn't access care. So we really needed to work on access, the really hardest part. I want to switch now and talk about the other infectious disease so that it relates a little bit to Bethel, because I'm supposed to talk about both places. And this is a little girl that came down from Dinka Land. We had lots of people coming down from Dinka Land. And her sister, you can't quite see, she got cut off in this picture, has Kala-Azar. And by her body habitus, I thought she probably had Kala-Azar, but she doesn't, she has TB. And actually, you know it by looking at her face. She's got these bright eyes, and TB patients, they have bright eyes. You give them food, and they will just eat it. You give them more food, they'll eat it. You give a Kala-Azar patient food, and they don't want anything to do with it. And so they are different diseases. They have in common that they're killer diseases and that they require long-term treatment. The Kala-Azar treatment is 30 days of injections. Now it's a few less. And the TB treatment is 6 months minimum of oral medicines. Just to show you what it's like, this is sputum-positive TB. This is after 6 months when he got married. So it works. This is giving directly observed therapy, which we do very routinely. And this is a little baby, actually not a baby, it's a boy. Mother brought this boy to us and said, I have buried all my children. Now I'm giving the white ladies this child to bury. I am not going to bury another one. So we treated the child for Kala-Azar and for TB, and she gets to go home with a living relative. So it does work. You know, when we were trying to get medicine, our coordinators from MSF would go in and schmooze with the embassy-type staff, because that's how you get people to give you grants. And they would say, well, why are you treating these people? They're going to die anyway, which I find is really the wrong way to approach this. Oh, now you've treated them, now you've got to help them live, right? Isn't that? So I just want you to remember that when I continue about this, because really it's possible. This is scrofula, which is nodal TB. This is spinal TB. We had 25% in Douar of spinal TB, people with spinal TB. And this girl actually can't stand up because it turns out there's so much of a buildup of pressure with pus in there that she can't stand up, so she walked the whole way. Her family bought her new clothes, because if you buy somebody clothes, especially a girl clothes, then they're probably going to get better because they feel better. Didn't work, so they came to us. And we actually, you guys, this is my only gross film. We actually made a cut in her thigh where the pus could drain down because it was already going down her psoas muscle. And we drained it out. You can see it on both sides of her. We covered most of it up on the front with cotton, but we couldn't get the other side of her. And after we finished draining it, she stood up straight and walked. So, like, talk about a miracle cure. This is a little kid. This one never liked me, so I can't show you the after picture. But you can see the bend in the back. We still have 18% of our people who get admitted with TB have spinal TB, which is really, really unusual. We like to guess what it's about, but we'd need more research to know. And this is little Taban. Taban came to us when we were in Douar with at the end of the big Calazar outbreak, and she had a wound on her leg. We washed out the wound, and we were pretty sure it was TB because it looked like it was chronic osteomyelitis in the bone. And we finally convinced MSF that we could treat this little one, and we treated her with food, lots of entertainment on our compound, and this is what she looked like 6 months later, which is awesome. But the interesting thing is she came from Dinka land as well. I had to go up and do a survey there once, and this girl shows up, and she starts talking to me. Of course, she's talking to me in Dinka, and I speak mostly Nuer, but anyway, she was talking to me, and then she kept saying, Taban, Taban. Taban is Arabic for suffering. So I said, yeah, I believe you're suffering, and I was trying to do this in whatever language I could think of, but just wait till we have a clinic. So finally, I got a translator because she was insistent on telling me she was suffering. So the translator comes, talks to her, looks at me, talks to her, looks at me again. He says to me, Jill, you know her. She's Taban from Douar. And because everybody's name is like that, people name themselves suffering and war and things like that. And I just didn't get it. This is the same girl. So there to the embassy staff that didn't think people lived. Anyway, so she lived. Now I'm going to digress a little teeny bit, just a few numbers. In the year 2000, 17.7 million deaths were due to infectious and nutritional diseases, and 97% of those people that die were in the so-called developing world. In other words, places where I work. And what to do? You know, Paul Farmer wrote this book, Pathologies of Power, and he sort of describes the structural violence that confines people who are poor away from access to education and healthcare. And I think that's very true, and that we're working very hard to try to change that. I don't know we've been successful in America either. But in the developing world, we're not successful yet. His solution is preferential treatment for the poor. And they do amazing things. MSF's solution was focusing on neglected diseases. I don't know if you've heard about it. They had the Access campaign where they tried to get people involved in pursuing medications for neglected diseases. Those are diseases where the drug market potential is insufficient to attract private sector response because my people can't pay people to develop a drug for them. And it actually was successful. All of those ideas and people working on it have made a difference. Just so you know, instead of 500 million people at risk and 500,000 sick with the disease, now there's 200 million and less that get reported. Also for Calazar, 95% are in Sudan, South Sudan, India, Nepal, Ethiopia, Brazil, and Somalia. That has 3 more countries than it did when I started. One of them is South Sudan. That doesn't count. It's the same group of people. But the other 2 are Nepal. It came up from India. And Somalia, it came over from Ethiopia. And it's associated, of course, with malnutrition, displacement, poor housing, etc. But there has been rescue. And I started listing all the organizations that have come up that have done an amazing job. And I ran out of paper space. But I did make sure to put the last 2 on, which, three of them are very important for us. The Institute for One World Health developed okayed a new drug for us to use and got it started. The Global Fund, TB, and PEPFAR was just this amazing legislation that was an emergency plan for AIDS overseas. And by the way, that was George Bush that did it. The good legacy from him. And it really has saved millions and millions of lives. It's unbelievable. So here's, I think you can't read it. Sorry. There's 3 new drugs for Kala-Azar now. Promomycin is an old drug, and they brought it back. One World Health did that. Liposomal amphotericin B was developed by some hematologists for cancer chemo patients with invasive fungal diseases, and it works for Kala-Azar. We get it at cost from WHO gets it at cost and sends it to us. So it's actually a free drug, although you have to pay transport and all that. Miltefosine used to be a chemotherapy drug, and it works for our people that we can't cure otherwise. The other thing we have for access, and people forget this, is you have to be able to diagnose people. So if people come in and you don't know what their problem is, you're going to treat the wrong thing. You treat people for malaria. Everybody who has a fever gets treated for malaria, and then treated for malaria, and then treated for malaria. And that doesn't always work. You really need to diagnose it properly. And I'll show you one of the new sticks they've developed to diagnose at bedside. But here's the Kala-Azar mortality since I started working. This is South Sudan, since I started working. And I would just like to say, this is, it just makes me cry. A lot of it is the new protocols. That probably changed the 11 to 7%. Another large part of it is blood transfusions, because our children in malaria areas, they're all anemic, of course. And if you have a hemoglobin of 3 when it should be 13, and you have Kala-Azar and get a fever and diarrhea, you're going to go into heart failure and die much more easily. So the transfusions are really life-saving. And to this day, they have really stopped most of the night call that we did when we transfused people with hemoglobins less than 4 now. So it was really amazing. But I think one of the other things that has helped us, especially in our area where the mortality is now down less than 2, is that people know us and they come early. And once they know a center and they know people are actually going to help them, they come in, they don't have to come to me, they know who's the person that diagnoses them. They know who they need to go to. So they come to our clinic and they see our national staff and they get themselves under treatment. And I lots of times am not seeing my favorite patients anymore. And this is what happened, the most recent outbreak. And the outbreak, these are numbers from Old Fangak, where I work now. And I am no longer with MSF because we decided to, I will tell you later, but the reason I showed these is that the highest number treated when there were 2 sites with MSF was 10,000. We have 1 site without other expats, and we treated 5,000, was more than half of all the people treated in South Sudan. And I think a lot of it was because people knew who we were. And so we got people from all over. They would put people in boats, send them up the river, even on grass mats, send them up the river. And so we got lots and lots of people, and we were able to get a really good rate of treatment. So we were very pleased with that. I'll switch back to TB. I'm being very schizophrenic here, sorry. There has been help with TB. The incidence is decreasing 2% per year. Of course, everybody would like it more. Still, there's 1 million children becoming ill and 200,000 dying. And the reason I point out that particular one is because that's where some of the people we can talk to can have some influence. We need better diagnostics for TB. TB diagnostics, how do you tell a child has TB? It's very complicated. And we need a bedside diagnostic tool for pediatric TB. When that happens, it will make a world of difference, really. The other thing that's interesting is, this is from WHO 2017. They say 1/4 of the world's population is infected. That's like all of us who have positive skin tests, right? We're infected. We're not sick, we're infected. And if you remember the UPICs, by age 8, they were 90% infected. So it's a big difference. It was only a 4th of the world's population now. But in the 1970s and 90s to 80s and 90s, it was 1/3. That's the number I always used to tell people. Now it's down to 1/4. So I think that must be good. And the death rate between 2000 and 2017 has fallen by 33%, even though I can't spell, and 54 million lives that were saved. That's what the WHO says. Some of their numbers, they have to round off. You can't tell exactly. But 33%, I mean, that's still a significant number. And I think some of that had to do with the Global Fund, which is countries that have money helping supply TB medicines to places that don't. So there is success. You don't see the success in our data, in a way, because it looks like we're having an increased incidence. But the reason this graph looks like it does is that at the end, in December 2013, a civil war started in South Sudan. It was the most devastating thing and continues to be much more devastating than the civil war between North and South Sudan. And there were, within 2 weeks walking, or 3 weeks walking, I guess, there were 3 other centers treating TB besides us, and we're the only people left. And so we're getting all the people. So I don't think we can make a comment about the incidence of TB looking at this, looking at our graph. Just so you know, this is what Sudan looks like now, and you can see the white line separates North Sudan from South Sudan, and the more interesting picture, or the more sad picture, is where the oil wells are, and it's a curse to have oil. And so much of what's happened is because of oil, and I would not wish oil on anybody. So now I'm going to tell you a nice story. So this is one of our first years of having bags, blood bags, to do blood transfusions with, rather than trying to do it from one person and pushing in the other one, which was really a bloody mess. This is little Nabal. She was breathing too hard and looking like she wouldn't live, and now her mother is like, oh my gosh, this is my daughter, and she's going to live. And she got her blood from Shaukia, the Dutch nurse who started the program with me. And Shaukia is O negative, I'm O positive. She gives to the girls, I give to the boys. So, and we also try to get it from relatives, of course. But these blood transfusion, you can do that really far in the bush. They've got really neat typing cards now that you can use, especially for people that have never had a transfusion before. So you do need a little more lab than you have in the far bush, in the little villages, but at a place like we're working in Old Fangak, we have no trouble doing it. So this little girl gets her blood transfusion. A couple days later, she comes out to show Shaukia she's doing really well, and then she walks with Shaukia while she goes to the plane that we have coming in and unloads the plane, and then Shaukia gets on the plane and takes off. And as the plane starts going, because Shaukia's going home, as the plane starts going, little Nyabol starts screeching and running hysterically down the airstrip path after the plane. The plane takes off and she throws herself on the ground crying hysterically because her blood is leaving. And she doesn't know what to do about it. Oh my gosh. So we called Shaukia with a satellite phone when she was in Nairobi, and she talked to Nyabol and told her she was okay. Don't worry, I'm leaving my blood with you, no problem. And Nyabol calmed down. Well, this year, a beautiful young lady came in to see me in clinic, and I thought, now what does this lady need to see me for? She doesn't really look all that sick. I asked her, and she said, oh, I came to find Shaukia. You know, Shaukia, who has my blood. I thought, oh my God, this is the same lady again, right? And so she lives about a day's walk away and has a couple of kids now and is doing quite well. She did not die. And so it's always nice to see that. After the North stopped having gunships on the river, we could move back to the tributary of the White Nile, or we could move there. Another organization decided that's where they wanted to move. I never wanted to live in a town, but anyway, it was sort of little. Nobody lived there anyway because you couldn't because of all the gunships. But people started moving back because they could be near the water. But this organization said, we'll take over the program, and you can be our consultants, and we'll manage everything. I thought, I like it. Okay. So we went there. A couple of years later, they left me with an entire program. But the reason why I agreed to come was that there was a borehole there, and we had water that you could pump. And that makes so much difference. In the first place, I don't have abdominal cramping all the time, and we don't have nearly as much problem with waterborne and water wash diseases right in our town. So it was magic. This is another picture of it in the rainy season, obviously. This is the building they finally gave us, so we could have a building to have an inpatient facility with water. You can wash hands. It's an improvement. You can get fish and eat, and you can have an inside building for your pharmacy. This is Quay. Yes, he is that tall. And yeah, he separates all the medicines, has them all documented properly. It's really good. You have beds, maybe not quite enough, but it works out. People still live near the river, so here's one homestead, and you can see the little path going to the river. It's coming towards us there. And here's another improvement that happened. This is that dipstick I told you about, trying to diagnose Kala-Azar. This dipstick is in the format that all the tests WHO is trying to get into the little clinics are made. So the first one stripe is the control. So that obviously has to be there. So one stripe is negative, 2 stripes is positive, 3 stripes the test doesn't work, use another. That is the same for hepatitis, for HIV, for Kala-Azar, for brucella, there's so many of them. It's exactly the same. With that type of format, you can get it to the villages. So that's been a major improvement. Of course, we've trained people to do all the dilutions now. One of the problems, though, with moving up in the world is that you have to do it right. And that's very complicated. I affectionately call this my amoeba bed, because when a kid has diarrhea, there are no Pampers there. When a kid has diarrhea, of course it goes in the foam, and the next person sits up on the bed like this, pushes themselves up, and pretty soon they eat, because everybody eats with their hands, and pretty soon they're eating amoeba. You have to be able to have something to clean it. You don't just remud the surface of the ground anymore. Now you have to have something to clean it and something to clean. So it is, you can do it wrong. And really, when we bring healthcare, we need to bring good quality healthcare. We shouldn't bring amoeba bed. We should bring good quality healthcare every place. We have a clinical officer now. This is Sanduk, and he is one of those people that has a healing voice. When you talk to him, even when I talk to him, I tell him my problems or something. I can't get World Food Program to help or something. He has this healing voice that always takes care of you, and he's awesome. And everybody in the village trusts him. You make sure that moms get their kids vaccinated. The other thing we did was, of course, help with nutrition. This is high-energy milk, which everybody there likes, but the most amazing thing we got is plumpy nut. Do you guys know plumpy nut? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I love plumpy nut. It's 500 calories in that little thing. Actually, I've never tasted it, but it's 500 calories in that little thing. Apparently, it's very sweet, and you don't have to bring firewood and boil water to get food. You can feed it all night long. And this kid, who is also getting a blood transfusion, you might not realize is malnourished, but you see those puffy eyes? That's a type of wet malnutrition, kwashiorkor, and these kids are the ones that die so quickly. And the plumpy nut has all the micronutrients that you need, and that's what probably saves their lives. The skinny, malnourished kwashiorkor, the marasmic kids, all you need to do is feed them. They get better and treat any illnesses. So this kid, we fed him plumpy nut, and this is when he gets well. I know it doesn't look all that well. He was running too fast when he got really well. But these kids don't die. All you have to do is feed them. So he did really well. Back to treating outbreaks of Kala-Azar. This is that outbreak I showed you that happened in Old Fangak, where we had treated 5,000 people one year. And we'd learned how to respond. We preload children's syringes, and we at least put the needles on adult syringes, so we get everything all ready, so it can go really fast. We do, like an assembly line. They have a certain number of questions they ask. You have diarrhea, vomiting, cough? Okay, go get this. Then they give all the kids their little syringes, their torture, and they have to hold it on their little hands, and they go sit down in a semicircle, and then someone comes by and takes the syringe and injects it. Therefore, you know they got the right thing, because the person who knows how to read is the one that loaded the syringes. So this person just knows how to give injections. They go around the semicircle, and then that part of the semicircle peels off, and they've got another semicircle there, and you can treat it very quickly. Just going back to access to care. Access to care is a lot. It means water and sanitation. It means local diagnostics, not ones you sent in. If you send the test in to get treated, we did this, we increased our death rate by 20%. That was to send it, because it takes so long. Improved and shorter length treatments, which we got, because now we have new drugs. We can give 2 at one time. It only takes 17 days, which turns into 21 because we don't inject on Sunday. But that's much better than 33 days. We have nutrition, and we have blood transfusions. So that part of the access is good. That people know where we are is good. But I want you to just think about the logistics. So remember that table full of needles? So if you have 500 people being treated in a month, every one of them gets 2 injections, that's 1,000. For 17 days, that's I think 17,000 needles and syringes you get in on your little teeny plane, plus everything else. oh man, you have to add and multiply correctly or you make a big mistake. We also got a market, which is nice, a table for the TB people, and we get to do lots of things that are really fun. Like, we now bring in walkers. I think there should be a program for walkers in Africa. I'll tell you, it's so helpful to get people who've been too sick to stand up to learn how to walk again. It is just, it's miraculous how many people, I could tell you story after story of people whose whole lives were changed because they're no longer lying on the ground because we gave them a walker. This is little Gatcha, and he had spinal TB, and he was paralyzed from it, and it took a year before he got his nerves back. He was in this one mud hut the entire year doing nothing else. How boring. But now he's walking with a walker. He actually came over to see us because he wanted to tell me that I should now pay for him to go to school, which I did. And we trained women who are not too literate to be able to do dispensing, and we play with our kids because they're cute. And our patients still have a mind of their own. These are our inpatients. And they didn't want to be inpatients. They liked being outside, in the fresh air, so they sleep outside on a piece of wrapper from a World Food Break. They move to our area because there's health care available, which is a bit sad for me because it's a lot. The kids start doing just what the moms did. You see, here's the nice platform outside the mother's house, and there's the little child making the same. I think they're going to try to sell something, I don't know what. And the people still do their same activities of daily living, but they have hope for health. And that's the goal, hope for health. She's carrying the wood. Here you can see how you make food. You soak the food in that white jerry can at the back. First you pound it with that big stick on the right side. Then you soak it, and then you grind it. In fact, one of the Darfurian traders that came through town gave us one of those stones for our patients, which was really nice. We have lots of people doing nice things. And then when you know you're going to be healthy, you can do really adventurous things like put all that grass together, sleep on top of it, and know it's not going to sink. I never understood that one, but it doesn't sink. They just float upriver and sell it all. And what we really like is little kids being happy, able to grow up to be adults with both parents still alive. So thank you very much.